Hey, good morning, John. Next episode of Lean Pulse. So this is a topic that you brought up that I can tell you're very passionate about. Why don't you introduce it? Really, what we want to talk about portfolio, but you want to go a little bit deeper.
And we hear so many things, and there's so many, I'll call it, whether it's bad habits, anti-patterns, or whatever. But how many times have any of us heard, working in the Agile world, somebody at a team level saying to some more senior manager, "You'll get it when you get it, you'll know it when you see it," that kind of thing.
Yes,
And so
I've
my
been guilty of
topic,
that.
and this is what I came up with the other day, is the question: does a member of the portfolio management group have a right to know where capacity for the portfolio is being invested, when a release might occur, what features might be in that release, what the roadmaps look like? And my answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
They're the ones paying for it. They need to know. And that's what this discussion is about.
So does that mean, and I know the answer, but does that mean the teams need to pick dates, arbitrary dates, and say, yes, we're going to deliver all of this at that date?
See, and this is part of the thing that we have to be really cautious about. No. They might say, here's a target date for the release, but we got to have some flex in there just in case of where we're at. So it's not an absolute, but and we've got to have better discussions with senior management. They're the ones paying the bill. And here's something really important. I just thought of this. If we have the right portfolio management group, because somebody is going to listen to this and say, yeah, but this person's over there. No. We're basing this on the fact that you took the time to have the right folks that are in your portfolio management group or team, whatever you want to call it. But they're already there. The folks that are doing all of the strategic and tactical stuff at the portfolio group, they're already in that group. Otherwise, we have to say SLT, ELT, and I'll make up all these other words. We're assuming that you did the right setup. And if you didn't do that, then what I'm going to say ain't going to make a difference anyway.
So I want to be Mr. Anti-Pattern today. Here's a common thing, in fact, working with a client right now that's dealing with this. Leadership wants to see what they deem agile metrics. They want to see what um, story counts, throughput of stories, velocity, things like that. So if I'm in that role, why am I asking for those type of quote unquote agile metrics? What should I be asking for?
Well, we need to train them to know what they should want to see and what will add value for their decision-making process. Here's something really important that so many things are lost on. And this comes from, this is not talking about OKRs or KPIs or anything. It says, look, we collect data in order to support our decision-making process, which means we have to provide the folks at the portfolio group level, those are those senior managers, so that they have enough information in order to make wise decisions in moving the portfolio forward.
And there's the key. We've seen this in many organizations. This might be my current client, but it could be clients 1 through 10, 1 through 20 that all struggle, excuse me, with this problem. They're looking for data to make decisions with. The only data available to them are these quote unquote agile metrics, story points, and so forth. And I look around and feel a little bit of chagrin, a little bit of embarrassment because I was perhaps part of that community that way back in the early 2000s, we were deflecting attention improperly. We're saying, well, no, don't look at task hours. Well, what do you use to measure? Well, we measure predictability with velocity. I'll use that one. What we should have been saying is, no, let's go look at the system. Let's go look at the progress that is being made. But here's the problem I want to toss back to you. I'm a really busy executive. Are you asking me then to move away from this really quick report I can look at and make a judgment on over to trying to this ambiguous thing you're talking about, go look at the system? How am I going to fit that into my schedule?
Okay, so really important. And let me show just and you know that we don't share a lot of stuff. This is a picture out of Scaled Agile, and it's the portfolio management picture. People should think from this picture, look, we have to have the right cadence-based discussion set up so that we are giving our portfolio group what they need to make decisions. This particular picture shows budgeting discussions every half year or so. Some people say, well, that's every other PI. Great. It shows strategic level discussions about once a quarter. Somebody will say that's once a PI. Great, whichever way they go. And the tactical level is something that this shows once a month or once every 2 iterations. Again, whichever you choose is great. But we've got to figure this out so they're getting it frequently enough without people taking extra effort to do status reports. The information that we should be presenting should be something that we should set up in a tool, should be instrumented, should be something that in perfect world, they would have access to it anytime they wanted to look at, and they would get the same data that they would get in this discussion, or if somebody created a quote unquote status report.
You made a
But they
really
should all be the same.
you made a really important statement I want to dive into. Give them the information to make the right decisions. What decisions can I make from the quote unquote agile metrics, story count, velocity? What decisions can I make from that?
Well, so let me bring in a real
None
life
good.
example and then get to that.
Okay.
So I need some hard data first, and I'm going to stop. Actually, I'm going to scroll up here just to make a comment, because this is going to go into a discussion point I'm going to make in a second about these roadmaps.
Mm-hmm.
And roadmaps, notice this one shows the solution. That's the thing we're building, whether you call it a product, a system of systems. But when SAFe uses the word solution, it could be the product, the system, or the system versus the portfolio roadmap. And that's all the epics in the portfolio. So I'm going to come back to this. So if you're looking at this again, this is the Lean Portfolio Management article. So as we're talking about this, so really, really important. I was working with an organization. They had about 4,500 folks in it. So it's an SMB. They had about a dozen arts. And by the way, when they set it up, they didn't know any better because they didn't get the right folks around to ask questions of. So unfortunately, some folks don't have experience in this, and it doesn't mean that anything other than that they don't yet know. So each of
They
these
tried
dozen
hard,
arts,
just didn't have the background,
yeah.
experience. Yeah.
So each of these arts it became its own portfolio. And the folks at the portfolio level, they were the wrong folks. Some of the right folks had to be in multiple portfolio meetings, which means they had way too many meetings. Again, they had no idea of the metrics. At the point in time when I started working with them, they had about 225, 245 epics in work in these dozen or so arts. So the portfolio group members had to be in multiple portfolios to have a clue, and they never got a complete
get
picture.
That visibility.
So they didn't have that visibility.
Right.
So, and to be quite honest, one of the things we did is we started combining them in appropriate portfolios, because a portfolio is a group of development value streams. We know that from Lean. SAFe picks up on that. The other part from Lean is, hey, this group of value streams, and I know that I'm going to say something contradictory to the article in SAFe right now, but when you read about portfolios in Lean, it really is that group of value streams, including the operational value stream, those development value stream support.
Yeah.
Well, now we've got this complete picture. And you might have multiple groups in a small company, you might have, something else. But here's something really, really important. When they started out and they started getting into these metrics. And so now I'm just going to talk about one art and one, actually probably two epics. But in general, so there was this one art, it literally had, when they started, and I've got the wrong one I'm staring at. When they started, they had 25, excuse me, they had 19 epics in work. So when I say that, and that's a shorthand, so I'm saying it wrong, this art claimed to be working on features from 19 different epics.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got to say it right, because people don't work on epics; they work on the stories that support the features that are part of the epics.
Right, but
now,
we get it. That's what they were. That was their work impetus, if you will.
Right. So, but now here's something really important, and they hadn't done this. So in order to get to this data, you got to do some tool manipulation. And so, yeah, I do have some data mining stuff in my background. It's a little bit more data than others, and I don't mind digging into, all sorts of stuff. But out of this, so there were 19 in work. 10 of those actually had features in when we were doing this analysis in this PI, which means the other 9 had 0. So those 10 that has stuff in work, it might have only been one. As a matter of fact, 7 of them had one feature and 3 of them had many features. So in other words, now this is really important. This gets into it. So what that says, and by the way, I'm not going to get exact numbers here, but if we were really working on features from 10 epics, that means on average, every one of those 10 epics has less than 10% of the art's capacity. And it really is less than that, because when you pull in production support, it's going to be less than 10%. Now here we've got senior management. I can't use the word portfolio group yet because of the way they set up their portfolios, their senior managers had to get involved. We're talking SLT and ELT, literally in this company up to the C level, the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, et cetera. In order to get that data, they had to ask everybody questions all the time to see what's going on. And they couldn't figure out why nothing ever got done.
And talk about an inefficiency for their own time.
Absolutely.
So I want to pull it back to, again, that comment you made that I think is so powerful, the decisions that they can make. The decisions you can make from the Agile metrics, story count, feature count, things like that, are solely about systemic improvement for the process that we use to deliver value. We need to be focusing on product level metrics, on outcome-based metrics. And the challenge there is to make them not as consumable, more consumable than the Agile metrics, because those are the data points that they can make decisions on, real world decisions. Now, to your point about getting it to the right level, that's one aspect, is the aggregation of, if you've got 100 epics going on, you're going to have to aggregate that outcome data based on how the system is moving forward, how customers are receiving it, are you improving flow, things like that. And that's where one of the big, huge metrics I'm such a fan of, perhaps my favorite, flow efficiency, right? Is how efficient are you at taking that unit of value? And I want to use that quote you and I talked about this morning from a book you recommended called This Is Lean. The quote is, flow efficiency is defined from the perspective of the flow unit. What is the piece of value flowing through? And that applies to OVS as well as DVS, operational value stream and development value stream. And the important factor is the time during which the flow unit receives value. If you're going to measure anything other than outcomes, that's what you need to be measuring, is flow efficiency. Looking at productivity numbers, can you make decisions from that? Yes, they're not good decisions, and they're going to be the wrong decisions, the ones that you shouldn't even be making. They're not valid questions to even ask. Are my teams productive? That's not what matters. Productivity takes care of itself. When we look away from productivity and focus on that unit of value flowing through. And the example to use in This Is Lean, which I think is a great example, is for a patient. They're talking about a patient going through a process. Put a camera on their shoulder and watch the camera and watch that value going through. One thing that I called out with you is you have to be careful. You need a camera on the unit of value. And in the case I'm talking about in This Is Lean, early in the book, they use the example of 2 different patients going in for a diagnosis. The unit of value is not the patient, it's the diagnosis. The patient needs the diagnosis. That's the unit of value that needs to flow through. That's the only data that leadership, SLT, ELT portfolio should really be focused on for making decisions. When they look at that and say, wow, we're really struggling in this step, whether it's OVS, DVS, whatever, we're struggling in this step, there's a lot of delay there. That's when they start to look at the Agile metrics to see, is that one area amongst many we can use to improve that outcome? But it's always about focusing on flow efficiency when it comes to any type of non-outcome based metric.
And what's really interesting is you bring this up. And by the way, the flow metrics are incredible to get insight into. Those 2 go all the way back to lean. We called it activity ratio.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're getting into that same idea. It's been renamed sometimes.
It's not that Safe created it.
It's
It's
not
been
that
out
they've
there for a
created it,
long
nor
time.
did project to product, nor did DevOps. It's been around.
Mm-hmm.
These equations, just like cost of delay divided by duration, has been around for a very long time.
Mhm.
So in your perspective, by the way, that big view, if we're watching, what are the things of value? Well, it could be an MVP, that MVP getting out the door. It could be the MMFs, the minimal marketable features that make up an MVP. And the reason I use MMF more than just feature is because too many people do kitchen sink or bucket features. They just keep tossing stuff
Yeah.
into a tool. So MMF is different than everything plus a kitchen sink. But another thing, and you got to get into, and by the way, this is incredible if people would start using it right. That lean business case we talk about in Safe from the Epic article, saying, so here's the MVP, here's the MMFs that are probably part of it, but here's the features that will flow after that if the MVP pays off. So you're starting to get
Yeah.
this tie-in with the outcome at the level that the currency, by the way, let's admit, let's put it on the table right now. Most senior managers don't care about the story level.
They
They care
shouldn't.
about a feature level.
Yeah, they
That's the
should.
features of stuff that they're going to release.
Yeah, or even the epic level. I want to tie into something you just said though about the MMF component. And again, one of those my favorite concepts is the MLI, minimum learning increment. Now you're getting data leadership can make decisions based upon. We
Yep.
see that very initial embarrassing MVP, and there's a stack of features that are lined up behind it that if we keep going that direction, this is most likely the direction we would go. That's where leadership can make really valuable, substantial, impactful decisions. Should we adjust course? Should we even continue? That's where the lean startup cycle comes in. Those are the decisions they should be focused on. Instead, we're allowing them to look at agile metrics and call people on the carpet and say, you're doing bad here, you're doing good here. That's not what those metrics are for. They
Right.
never were intended for that. The problem is, and again, that's on us from product development, is that's all we've been giving them. We need to create that strategy. We need to have that approach where it's very clear where the decision points are. It's very clear what the data points are that we're going to look at to make those decisions. Now you've taken that same executive time that they've got a minimum slice because they're dealing with everything else as well. They've got this small little time slice to make a decision. They're looking at the right data to quickly make those decisions. Pivot, persevere, adjust, whatever it might be.
And now you're getting into that lean startup picture.
Mm-hmm.
Again, from that Epic article saying, here's how you're going to figure out how long you're going to work on features from that Epic until you've gotten everything that you can that's worth. And by the way, for anybody that hasn't experienced this yet, when you use that lean startup cycle decently, that little picture that says cycle until WSJF tells you otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
what happens is, and by the way, if you have an art with 200 or with 25, 20 to 25 epics, this doesn't work as well because everything gets muddy. But you have features from a new epic come in, and all of a sudden the features from that prior epic don't look as valuable to the
Right.
folks that are doing WSF, the business owner, product manager, or system architect. They're the ones talking about it. And all of a sudden they realize we got what we wanted from that other epic. Maybe that epic's done. To me, one of the things that I notice when the value for WSF goes sub 1, in other words, it's 0.9 or less,
Yeah.
and other stuff is at 5s and 8s and 10s, that other epic is probably done regardless of what somebody wants.
Right. And that's a scary thing that I point out to people starting off portfolio when I'm teaching about LPM. You have to get used to this concept. Rarely, if ever, are epics completed to where we thought they originally would be. When we first envision that epic, we have this picture of what it's going to look like. Rarely is that accurate. And that's okay. That's a good thing. Most of the time, what happens is, especially in a fairly static environment, we start on that epic and start delivering value. And we look at those decision points, and the decision is persevere, keep going, keep delivering. But we get towards the end, and we've delivered the substantial portion of the value. And what's left is somewhat minimal value, and there's still a lot of effort. WSGF tells you go to the next one. Does that mean we never finish anything? Yeah, in reality, we never do finish because value is never ending. So we apply that to epics as well. It's not about taking an epic, knowing exactly what it is and doing all the work needed. That's waterfall. It's about having a direction. An epic creates direction. Where should we go? And it allows us, because of that nature of it, to adjust along the way to pivot either direction or strategy, execution, whatever. But it also allows us to pivot away from it when it says, that's good enough. There's something more important to focus on.
And this discussion without that good portfolio group gets messed up. So in the example that I'm talking about, they had a couple of functional areas that were outside. There were so some skill sets that were outside the portfolio. And one of them everybody's got, but this other group, this functional area, the SVP in this area would have their folks throw over epics right at the last minute and expect features from those epics to be picked up by the art right now. And it would never happen because it wasn't integrated. And so here's an important thing about that portfolio group. If it really is a portfolio group, all the epics have to flow through it. And they have to come in here so that you get this idea of what's the most important thing that we can work on. And by using this, the portfolio itself will start taking into account things like compliance, those areas of non-functional requirements. It could be a group that's called reliability or RMA type of stuff. It could be a group called security. But if you're throwing stuff at a portfolio group and saying, you got to do this week because, oh my gosh, whatever, all of a sudden you get these weird conversations that aren't part of a portfolio management group conversation.
The
And
Agile
that's a problem.
Manifesto says to respond to change, not react to change. And there is a difference. There's a reason for that. That response is a measured response. It's based on information. It is a data-driven decision. What we have far too often is that some leader somewhere coming in, hair on fire, having this panic situation. We've got to get this done right away. That is a result of not having a process in place, not having a process that looks into the future, that looks at these opportunities, these epics, all the way to features as opportunities. And they're nobody's baby. They sink or swim based on their cost of delay and their job size, their relative value based on the effort to deliver it. And it's a very objective approach. And so now, to take your example about, coming in at the last minute with all of these epics and features and such, that calms down. Once they learn the process, that calms down because they have an avenue to bring these opportunities in. And what they have is a very clear way of, maybe this is a panic situation. Maybe this is a customer we're about to lose, or a huge market opportunity that just popped out, whatever it might be. It could be that's the case, but we run it through the process very quickly. And this is a 5-minute effort sometimes. Run it through the process. It's a sanity check. Should we actually adjust that quickly? And sometimes the answer is yes. Most of the time, when we see it weighed against the other opportunities we have, I don't care if it's portfolio Kanban, if it's in the art Kanban, even at the team level, is we look at it very often, we say, wow, it seemed like a big deal, but in comparison to what we're already doing, it's not that big of a deal. Carry on. Let's keep going. It's building in that process. And that's a big part of what Lean Portfolio from Safe does, is it creates that process, almost a safety net to protect ourselves from ourselves.
And I'm going to say, rather than use the word process, I'm going to say, let's honor the portfolio Kanban, let's honor the art Kanban and run stuff through there.
Yeah.
Other than the word
The
process, everything
approach.
you said, but I want to coach folks honor the Kanban. By the
Yeah.
way, as we did that, and this is the lean startup cycle, and I just want to point out something really quick. So just above it is this lean business case. It's a template. You don't have to use it. You can modify it. There's actually a download. But you'll notice that in here, there's some areas to document some really important stuff. So for instance, additional potential features. Look at that. The MVP features. Now we've got this place that you should be having a discussion. And that's the lean business case for most organizations gets done earlier. And you asked a question earlier, right when we kicked off. Should we know an exact date? No. But if we're going to do a release, and let's say the MVP isn't the object, the ML, what's your acronym?
MLI, minimum
MLI.
learning increment.
Yeah, and it might be some other folks use minimum business increment. That's why I get, pause. It might not be the MVP, which means you might say, look, we're going to learn from the MVP, but then to actually release it, we're going to have these additional 7 features.
Yeah.
And so you could say, here's a release outside of these 7 features. Now you have a decision-making process that says, hey, we just got done with a PI. We got 6 of those features, not 7 of them. Do we release or do we wait until into the next PI when we'll have the 7th feature done? Now you have a discussion.
And that brings up, and just to wrap this one up, that brings up a really key point that we were trying to make earlier, is getting the right information in front of executives so they can make informed decisions and the right decisions. 90 times out of 100, 99 out of 100, when they're looking at these agile metrics, they're looking at the wrong data to make other decisions. It's the decisions we need to make. Should we pivot or persevere on this opportunity, on this outcome, on this approach? Are we making progress on increasing these performance metrics of the process, the system, the application? Is the customer experiencing more value? That's the things we should be measuring, is those outcome-based metrics. When we look at agile metrics, we need to back up and say the only reason we're looking at these is we're seeing an opportunity in the outcome metrics to improve, and we think that's one of the areas that we can improve. Predictability, consistency, whatever, quality, whatever it might be. But we need to be looking at the outcome metrics. It's the only way we can make valid decisions. And honestly, valid decisions by asking the right questions.
Hey,
So
because we've been talking metrics, I know we're heading for roll up. We do
yeah,
measure those flows. By the way, in my
yeah.
example, when we started, the flow time for that, the starting point average flow time was 316 work days for features.
Mm-hmm.
So think of how long that is. So we're saying over a year to get features done. And throughout the course of several PIs, we got that down to just over 3 PIs, about 131 work days. So by focusing on these things, you can get better, but you got to focus.
Yes.
You got to know what your starting point is. And if you don't have a starting point, you can't show this is the value we got. Think about that, 316 down to 130. That's a
Yeah.
huge reduction in cycle time.
And the reason we focused on that, to look at the enterprise system, the underlying system, look at those predictability, agile metrics, and so forth, is because we looked at the outcome metrics. Oh my gosh, it takes us over a year to provide a change for the customer, to a valid improvement, and the market's flying past us. That's an outcome metric. We have to improve that. Now, that could be a number of different things, but in that case, a lot of times we do look at those, more of those, how we do things, those system metrics. But where we really need leadership to focus on, for the most part, is those outcome metrics. Are we going the right direction? As we're improving the system to build better outcomes, are we focusing on the right outcomes to build with that improved system? So I do want to wrap this one up so we don't go too long, John. This is another conversation we will revisit, definitely. So thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you in the next episode.
See ya.